coaching was an afterthought, right? It actually wasn't, I want to do coaching. It wasn't like that. It was an evolution. And it turned out that I was sought after by others in the organizations in which I worked for advice, right? So let me just be clear, coaching is not giving advice, right? Coaching is helping people to find their path forward. And it's very much about now and what's next.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues, the podcast where we interview business owners on how they built their businesses and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is Davis Nguyen, and I'm a business coach and the founder of Purple Circle, where we help business owners achieve their first 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure year, all without sacrificing their quality of life. Before becoming a business coach and before founding Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7- and 8-figure coaching businesses, and have been a consultant at several businesses doing over $100 million each, including some that are publicly listed and doing over $1 billion each. In every episode of the podcast, you're going to learn lessons that took our guests years to learn, and you'll be able to learn that in minutes. No matter if you're a new business owner or an established business owner, every episode is going to give you the clues in order to elevate your business.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues podcast. I'm Pedro, and today I'm joined by Nancy DDiA, who's a professional certified coach, PCC, through the International Coaching Federation with over 42 years of professional experience. She's the founder and CEO of DDiA Executive Coaching Group, where she coaches C-suite and senior leaders through organizational change. Before coaching, she spent over 25 years in senior enterprise roles, including as Global Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Boehringer Ingelheim, and she's a global advisor for Ceramount. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you so much, Pedro. It's great to be here. I'm excited about our conversation this morning.
Well, that makes two of us, right? I'm
Yep.
excited as well. And Nancy, something a little bit about me. I'm kind of a comic book nerd myself. Love the origin stories, love the first editions, right? So let's rewind a bit, because every coach has that moment where they look at their life and say, yeah, I guess this is what I'm doing now, right? So when was that for you, Nancy?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me what was my comic strip or what do I relate to in a comic strip. So
If you do have a superpower, I'm all ears.
Yeah,
Okay.
I will say that The Far Side Larson was, some of my favorite comic strips as I got into corporate America. I think it started when I was in high school. And you know how you get a job when you're in high school, and most people get jobs at, Burger King, McDonald's, or, this now I'm going back. So I'm dating myself, having 40 years in corporate America. That we're talking about the 1970s and um, late 1970s when I got my first job. So I decided that I wanted to go into banking, and I became a part-time teller. In banking. And so my hours, and I worked in a shopping mall, and my hours were 3 to 11. And from that point, I sort of worked my way into financial services, loved it, did a lot of what I would say at that time, what was called alternative banking, which, believe it or not, was uh, home banking or online banking and ATMs. I mean, still in the 70s and 80s, people weren't that dependent on ATMs. Everyone wanted to go to the bank and cash their paycheck. Even direct deposit wasn't a big deal. So I did that for 25 years, but I realized through that growth and development that working with people and leaders was really where my passion lied, where I got the most juice and energy. And through that time, I had a variety of amazing managers, had the ability to look at some of the smartest people in the world running banking. I was, in a top Wall Street bank. And after, I would say, probably 20 years or so, and, this was post 9/11. I unfortunately was very close to when that happened. And um, that was life changing for a variety of reasons. One, I was going through cancer treatment myself, and I was on medical leave, and I realized that life was so precious and finite. And that was the moment at which I recognized that I wanted to give back and make a difference. And usually that light bulb moment does happen with people who have life threatening illnesses or conditions. And that's what moved me into leaving the financial services arena, setting up my LLC, my limited liability company, to do coaching and advisory work. And I did some consulting at Beringer Ingelheim to help them at that point with, at that time we called it diversity and inclusion. It wasn't DEI, it was just the big D, and we were moving into inclusion. And I consulted there for a while, loved the company so much that the head of HR offered me a full time position there as director of diversity and inclusion. So I thought about it, accepted that job, and then, 17 years later, I became the chief diversity officer. I was responsible for engagement and equity within the organization. So I had a great opportunity to listen to people and to help change happen and to create the awareness around the behaviors that occur in the workplace that make people feel good and in some cases not so good. And so my job was to hold that space and allow that to happen. So that's sort of a long journey, having been a native New Yorker growing up in Brooklyn, New York, cement backyard, no grass, not much grass except the parks. And my wish, as a kid was I wanted to be an NYPD officer on the beat in a neighborhood. Now look at me, right? I mean, I never went into law enforcement, but I did go into an enforcement of some sort, right, which is equity and inclusion and giving people that sense of belonging. So that, even though it wasn't a literal, law enforcer, I would say it was a fairness enforcer that I've pretty much embraced my entire career. I mean, one of the things I loved as a teenager is differentiating myself. And I used to wear a t-shirt with 3 feet, three, you know, foot, feet, on it. And it would say, I like you, you're different. And even, at 10, 11 years old, I was always looking for difference. I had the most diverse group of friends. Uh, and so diversity has been something I grew up with in terms of desire of having a broader network and expanding my connections with people from all different parts of the world. And to this day, I would say I have many friendships around the world still. So I'm very proud of that. And that gives me solace and support to know that I'm not just in this little place, but I'm very well supported almost in any region of the world I go to.
Mm, okay. Interesting. So I also started at banking, right? As a clerk in the collections part.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, so we have that in common. That's interesting. Another thing that really caught my attention here is the diversity thing. That's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about Brazil and even the U.S. This is like, if I'm not mistaken, you can correct me here. This is like not a new trend, but it's something that's been happening more aggressively in the past 10 years. And you were there when this was almost like taking baby steps, right? The diversity and then the inclusion. So can you give me like an understanding from your point of view on the evolution of it? Like when you started that, was like something like you guys were pioneering that or not at all, and compared to today's world, if people are like more open-minded right now? I'm not even sure if that's something that's happening, but I'm very curious about you because you've been doing that for a while now, and I'm like, okay, how did that look like back in
Yeah,
the day? You know?
I love that. I love that question because and I have to admit, in the early 90s, I would say that the pioneers around diversity work and inclusion work were really financial services organizations. It was the big banks that were looking at, and typically, when you think about diversity and inclusion, even today around the world, the focus tends to be around women, right? And at that point, women were the underrepresented leaders in the workplace because the boardroom consisted predominantly of males. And you'd have a table of 12, and if you were lucky, one of that 12 might be a female. Forget about people of color or anything like that. That didn't come until later, but it was those two groups, people who did not represent the majority, that were of other ethnic or racial uh, groups that were not in the mix of influence, power, and leadership. And I think the additional part was also recognizing the yeoman share of work that women do, both in the workplace and the home. And 30 years ago, it was much more prevalent that women did everything. And some women might argue they still do everything. But we're seeing today much more of a partnership with uh, relationships where men and women alike are sharing the child care uh, needs and pickup times and dropping off and showing up and all of that. But in the 90s we recognized that childcare was a big issue, and the ability for flexibility, which is kind of an ironic circle right now because since the pandemic everything is return to work, return to the office 5 days a week. And in that early era, we were introducing flexibility for people to, and that was even before elder care needs were top of mind for benefits that people offered to their employees. So I think recognizing the needs of women having, dual roles, both at home and at work, was an attractor to gain talent and to also begin to see organizations like Chase or JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup demonstrating that women were moving into the C suite was really, I think, a step in the right direction. And Europe followed, right? Europe is still working actively. And you look around the world, I mean, Italy has um, a female prime minister, right? Um, or country manager, things of that sort. You start to see more and more women in leadership roles. And when we work with companies around the world, and what I see now is that the effort is much more on gender balance, gender equity. And that's typically a starting point for organizations because right now, women make up more than half of the world's population. Almost 52% worldwide are women or people who identify as women, right? And yet they do not represent, as you go up in ranks in corporate America, they're not represented. They're not representative equitably based on their population.
Okay. Appreciate the insight. Now, I'm curious about one thing, right? You went through those health issues,
Mm.
you mentioned a pivotal moment, and you brought up the fact that you kind of was looking into being an NYPD officer, right? So you went through that crossroad, let's
Mhm.
put it like that, the pivotal moment. But what made you choose coaching, right, slash consulting, and not go to, I don't know, being a police officer? You know that what made you pick on coaching? Like, I'm gonna do this.
Yeah. So coaching was an afterthought, right? It actually wasn't. I want to do coaching. It wasn't like that. It was an evolution. And it turned out that I was sought after by others in the organizations in which I worked for advice, right? So let me just be clear, coaching is not giving advice, right? Coaching is helping people to find their path forward. And it's very much about now and what's next. Not like therapy of now and what was and what you learned from that, but it's more about let's take the present moment and where do we want to go. And I found myself really helping people through my own curiosity of asking them powerful questions. And a couple of people said, "Oh, you're a great coach. You should be a coach." And I'm like, no, I just do this because I want to help people. And it really turned into what I would say much more of mentoring, where it was a bit more giving advice. But the deeper I got into becoming a well experienced or developed leader, the more I recognized the importance of asking people what they would do and how they arrived at that. And so, building on that, I thought getting the education and the foundation behind the purpose of coaching and the way to really coach, right? It would help me in my role as a chief diversity officer. So many chief diversity officers, not all, but many had an agenda. This is what we have to do. We have to create an inclusive environment, and you need to behave this way, and you need to do this. And I was never one of those leaders that told people what they need to do. I talked about what the results were if they didn't take action, right? Rather than saying you must be more inclusive. It's imagine what it would be like if you had a fully engaged team. What would it take to fully engage your team? Well, let's look at your team. And they would suddenly have that light bulb moment and realize, oh my gosh, these are all my buddies from college. I don't have anybody here that thinks differently than I do. Um, I need a tiebreaker. I need a wild card. I need, not to suggest people are wild cards, but I need somebody that isn't a similar thinker. I need a challenge partner. I need things like that. So my goal became helping leaders to see what they weren't seeing or consciously or unconsciously chose not to see. And so that then became, and I was getting older, right? I was in my probably late 40s, early 50s at the time. And I'm like, what am I going to do after I finish corporate America? And when and I finished probably a little bit later than I wanted because the pandemic set everybody's life and plans back. And this really became my third third of my chapter of life, right? Because I think of life in chapters. The first third of your life is your early career. The second third is really where you're growing and learning and probably largest earning years. And your third is taking those other two thirds, bringing it together and sharing that wisdom and driving that forward in ways that people can learn from, can be curious about, and they themselves can work to make change happen or have impact in ways they never thought they could. So that's sort of the full circle, Pedro.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Appreciate that. Now, I'm thinking right now about like you joined coaching what 22 years ago, something like that. You started your own business, right? And I understand for most coaches, I'm not saying it's your case, but there is almost like an evolution of who you start serving
Mm.
and who you end up serving now, because we tend up to sharpen the blade, attract a certain type of individuals. We understand who we can actually help the most and all that entails. So my question to you is like, can you walk me through the evolution of who you started serving, right? And who do you serve now, Nancy?
Yeah. In the beginning, you're expected to serve anybody that would be willing to give you uh, hours so that you can accumulate your hours. So it was family members, anyone that would be willing to be a subject for me to practice. And I was, I actually stayed away from the C suite at that point because I was learning, right? It was sort of, I was getting my training wheels and I didn't want to go in there knowing that there were at that time and still to this day so many experienced C suite coaches. And it wasn't until at that time I had been in the C suite myself. I had spent in the 17 years in my role so much time coaching executives around key messaging on where they stood around certain events that occurred in the world that were less than acceptable in the workplace and things of that sort to help them provide that comfort to employees. So I started with really junior people and it became more career type coaching. And I did a lot of career coaching at the time, but that wasn't my sweet spot, right? My sweet spot was really about the entanglement of corporate roles. And what happens as you rise through the ranks, the higher you go, the more complex and the lonelier it becomes. The fewer people you can trust. The ability for you to take risk is not just jumping off, you know, the rock into the water. It actually has consequences. And who do you run those by? Who could be that trusted advisor or that trusted source that you can share information with to challenge your thinking? And it wasn't until I felt confident that I had established fundamentals, some of the requirements of coaching competencies, that the International Coaching Federation requires. I had passed my exams to be able to operate at a certain level that was not only ethical, but also respectful of the coaching profession. And just as an aside, there are many people who think that because they have 20, 30 years of experience, they can be a coach, right? And to me, that's not coaching. To me, that's advising, right? So the difference, and sure, they could do or say whatever they want, but I frankly think that without the proper education or credentials, they're actually underserving their clients by not really giving them the full depth of what a coach brings, which is a couple of strong things to help them feel that they have this safe, trusted place to go to with no judgment, which is what a coach really serves as for an executive. For the executive to come to you and say, I don't trust anybody at this point to share this idea with. I'm afraid they're going to judge me on it. And so we talk through what all of those concerns are. And then we hopefully come full circle to them for them to get more confident in delivering it. So, long way of saying that you kind of start popcorning anyone that's willing to be your subject, right, in practice to refining and building and developing. But it also takes credibility. And it's not just, and when I say credibility, people need to feel comfortable with who you are. And they also have to trust that what they share with you will be kept in the strictest confidence, right? And I think that was an important quality that I brought not only to my corporate roles, but to my coaching roles. So for me, it has really been an extension of having that seat at the table, making that table a little bit longer to invite other people to that table that didn't necessarily get that seat, but to invite them so their voices could be heard. And so I leverage my influence and even position and ways to help others have voice. And that, I think, was a differentiator, that it was less about me and more about the people that I was able to influence on behalf of others.
Okay. So, Nancy, let's do a little game of pretend here. Let's pretend I'm your ICP today,
Mhm.
right? Your ideal client profile, your avatar. I'm one of those C-suite guys, okay, and I need help to navigate, corporate or whatever that looks like. So, first of all, how would I be able to find you, okay, marketing wise?
Yes, great. I'm on LinkedIn, Nancy DDiA, DIDIA. You can check out my website, DDiAexecutivecoaching.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm not on TikTok. Uh, I am on Insta and LinkedIn and Substack. So I do write some articles on Substack that focus around mostly workplace, a lot more reflective areas, but I also have a host of references of clients that have been in the C-suite that I can refer you to for, um, a perspective as well.
Okay. So still in that game, okay? I'm that guy still, C-suite, or your avatar. So let's say I look at what you have out there, right? LinkedIn, website, Facebook, Instagram, Substack, or even was referred to work with you, right? Someone told me, hey, you got to talk to Nancy. She's great. So I did the outreach, okay? I'm like, hey, Nancy, we'd love to know how does it look like to work with you. I'm interested. So we can speed up the sales process a little bit or not, if you want to add a note there. But we can say there's alignment. You see that you can help me. I see that you can help me. Okay. The real question I have for you is like, can you give me like a little peek behind the curtain of
Sure.
how does it look like to work with you? Do we have a one-to-many component? Is it like mainly one-on-ones? Just for people that are listening out there, what does it look like to work with your business?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to express the variety of ways you can engage with me. The one-on-one is really, truly when you sign up for coaching, you get me, um, especially executive coaching. That is really about meeting you where you're at in that moment. So a big part of that is a two-way interview, if you will. You asking me what types of executives perhaps I've coached, but it's really me meeting you where you're at, finding out what it is, what brought you to coaching, what it is you're trying to achieve with a coach, and also asking you two hard questions. Are you willing to do the hard work and dig in? And are you willing to accept that it's not a one and done and a fix, that it can feel messy at times? Because, with your permission, I'll push and challenge you. I'm not, and I'll be clear, I'm not a tough love coach. I'm a challenging coach, but I don't say, see, Pedro, I told you if you had done it this way, that's not how I coach. I also have sat pretty much in senior leader roles and senior leader meetings, board meetings. So I can relate to some of the challenges that you're experiencing. And also, I work in a variety of industries. And what I find is that the work is industry agnostic and it's much more behavioral in terms of how people react and respond to change and uncertainty. So, a big part of that, some people call it a chemistry interview. Are we going to jive together? Do you feel comfortable sharing with me? A big part of that uh, is this the person for the next 6 months or year that you want to work with? And I don't work by the hour. I work by engagement. And I don't believe that coaching is an hourly job, right? I think that you hire a coach to work with you, to be alongside you. And in some cases, that's even being in your meetings, right? And helping to see how you're showing up. And a big part of that involves me doing what I would call a 360 of people that work with you, that are cross functionally stakeholders of yours, and I get a snapshot. I do confidential interviews. I come back and put together a report for you, show you what I found, and from there, we can create some goals or areas that we want to address. At the same time, I recognize that life happens, and in some of those sessions, you might say to me, Nancy, can we put the goal work? I've got, a pressing issue right now. I want you to coach me through. So the key is really looking at hiring me more as a leader partner, and in an engagement rather than a coach to coach you through 4 or 5 sessions. So I I also do a link. It's called LINC, Personality Profiler, and that focuses on 3 key areas: your competencies, the things that you do well, your 2 primary motives, what drives you, what inspires you to do your best work, and your personality traits. Do you tend to be more of a collaborative person? Are you much more better with stress and able to recover quickly? And we use that as an anchor as well to go deeper into how you show up. And we uncover blind spots so that a big part of the work is understanding not only who you are, but who you are as a leader and how that plays out. So most of my engagements are a minimum of 6 months, but the majority of them are 9 months to a year, with many renewals for another, 3 to 6 months.
I love the idea. It's almost like a thought partner in
Right.
a way, right? A wingman, like someone that
Yeah.
you can rely on because you have the experience and you're outside the noise, right? You're not emotionally invested in the situation. So you have more of a neutral perspective, which is,
Exactly.
I think I love about that coaching, how coaching can actually help you with that. Okay.
So, but would you
Now,
hire me,
hmm?
Pedro, based on that?
Oh, of course. I mean, I love that,
Okay.
right? I mean, it's almost because here's the thing. I work in corporate, right? And it has so much competition that sometimes it's hard to know who to trust
Yeah.
because some people are like backstabbing all over, and if you say something in the wrong tonality in the meeting, sometimes you might get yourself in trouble or not, or you have someone that does in a way that is good, but they're doing terrible work, but they're climbing the ladder because they're doing something that you're not really getting what it is. So yeah, I mean, it's a tough game, the corporate game. Okay. Now, but yeah, I would hire you. Okay,
Awesome.
short
All
answer.
right. Good.
Now, I'm curious where you're taking all this, future wise, looking ahead. Where do you see the business going? Are you thinking about scaling, hiring, or is there a next step you're excited about, Nancy?
Well, I'm always looking to grow my business, right? There's no question. But there are, at this point in my life, certain things I won't do anymore. And not because I'm not capable or able. It's just I want to stay focused on coaching and also sharing my wisdom through the years. So I think a book is in my future. I think
Mm,
writing a book and maybe going on a book tour, in, but I get a lot of energy from working. Look, I'm in my mid 60s now at this point. Many people will say, and I believe it, I'm still very young and very healthy and, vital. I still have many good years ahead of me, knock wood up here. And I want to continue to build my affiliations, deepen my business, and hopefully grow to where I'd have more coaches and the ability to deliver more workshops. I currently do group coaching as well, so I'll uh, work with a company to focus on 4 key areas that could be centered around a leadership program that they deliver. Some of it could be strategies for faster decision making, how to deal with uncertainty in today's workplace using that VUCA model of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, and how we switch that to more creating the vision, building that understanding, right? Going from complexity to clarity and ambiguity to agility, and helping people as leaders to start to do that. But I have, several affiliates that I work with. So for me, it's growth. It's a book, some speaking engagements, but broadening my coaching capacity. So my primary lead would be executive coaching, and second to that would be leadership development.
Okay, so it's growing, but with intention, with purpose, and respecting some boundaries, as it
Exactly.
seems like it.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Now, whenever we're aiming towards something new, a next chapter, whatever that looks like, always something we're refining in the present, right? You mentioned a book. You mentioned you want to have coaches of one day under your wing, right? But what are you currently trying to improve or tighten up in your business right now?
I think the consistency is really a challenge for solopreneurs because your coaching is only as good as your last gig, right? And that has a finite contract or a finite timeline. So once that expires, what do you have to fill that revenue generating gap?
Mm.
So for me, it's much more around continuity, consistency, I would say predictable cash flows, which are the biggest challenge of a small business. Unless even if you're a storefront or a retail storefront, depending upon weather, times of year, your revenue fluctuates. And I think with coaching, it very much is like in a regular heartbeat. It kind of
Mm.
goes up, goes flat, goes up, goes below the line. And I think just looking at what could be some consistent flows, which is why I go for more, I would say, engagements rather than by the hour. I won't take an hourly um, engagement.
Okay. Now, I would love for us to step into sci-fi territory here.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's pretend we have a time machine in front of us, Nancy, and you can go back in time and you can give past Nancy from 22 years ago when you opened shop, right, with your business, one piece of business advice, okay, that you wish you knew back then that you know now. What would that be?
I think it would be to really have a clear mission. What is it that you're trying to do? What's your differentiator? What sets you apart? Even then, the coaching space was somewhat crowded but well established. I think the important thing is coming into something that sets you apart and fills the need that others aren't doing. So, what's your difference? What's your spice? And that was something I wish I knew 25 years ago. Certainly something now that I do. You can see that through my LinkedIn posts. They're much more about uh, some of it's topical, but some of it is much more observational about what I'm seeing and hearing. And I think it's less, and so many posts that you see on LinkedIn are here's what you need to do. Go do this, be this way, be that way. I'm much more reflective now. And I think that I wish early on I was much more about do, get this done, get that up there. And I did all the process things. I got the structure set up. I established, the business. I got the LLC going. I got an invoicing system set up, had all that, but I didn't really have, I didn't have, I had the domain, but I didn't really have a great website. And I'm not saying the website to me is an anchor. It's a go-to place. I don't really generate business from the website. Um, but I think and I didn't really have enough content to show my differentiation. So now I feel, 40 years later, 20 years later, that I I have a lot to share, and I have a lot of differentiating factors that set me apart.
Okay. Love that. Now, if someone listening wants to connect with you or follow your work, Nancy, and we're going to have all the links in the description, but where can people find you best and connect with you?
I would say email is the best right now, or LinkedIn, but email again is Nancy at DDiA executivecoaching.com. One word, DDiA executivecoaching.com. Check out my website. You could also, connect with me there if you want, but also you'll find me on LinkedIn as well. I would say that's the best way to get in contact with me, and also mention that you saw this podcast or heard this podcast with Pedro and I.
Okay. I feel the need to highlight certain parts of this conversation today. Okay. So, really quick, the origin story, when you shared with me, you went through cancer treatment, right? And that changed your perspective on life. And that later down the road in the conversation, we were discussing about coaching, right? And it's all about asking hard questions and all of that. So whenever I see someone owning their own stories, their own obstacles with such in a graceful way, and being open about what they struggled with and their own journey about it, right? I think at the end of the day, that makes it so much easier for people out there connect with you, on a human to human level. Because at the end of the day, like you said, we're gonna ask hard questions, right? So and that sometimes puts people into like a vulnerability stage, and they're like, oh my god, I don't want to talk about that. And I think it's only fair that you do the same, right? You do have your own journey, you do have your own obstacles, and like I said, you sharing that with me was showing me that you're a true coach, right? I think that's a key asset for a true coach. The honesty, having ownership of their own mistakes, on not even a mistake, but their own story, right? And whatever that happened to you, not shying away from that. That's one thing. I love the fact that you told me that coaching, you didn't wake up a day and you're like, hey, I'm a coach now, right? It was something that organically happened. There's an evolution to it. And you kind of told me, like, it's not advice giving, but I get it. In the early days when we're like feeling if there's like, wait a minute, people are asking for my opinion, people are like asking for my advice. I know that's not coaching, but sometimes it flags to us, it gives us a signal there's something in there, but eventually you got the certifications and all that, you felt like you need to validate that. So that is super cool to see someone who organically was almost like invited into the coaching space, right? Now, also something that I felt that was really cool was like you were putting in the raps with family members, right? In the early days, I was like, "Hey, how was the evolution of who you started serving?" You're like, "Yeah, I was taking in family members." I'm like, "Oh, that's so awesome, right?" Because I feel like a lot of coaching is like just put in the raps, man. Just exposure, test yourself, so you can sharpen the sword, sharpen your practice, sharpen how the way you talk to people, how you navigate the conversation. So that's also cool. And the last but not least, which we emphasized twice at least, is like you said, I don't believe coaching is an hourly job, right? That really hits home because I'm a coach myself, right? So in the early days, I was charging by the hour. So guess what? People are treating me like a commodity. They were comparing my fees to whatever, from cleaning lady to lawyer, and you're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. Also, when the clock hits the mark at the minute 60, nothing magical happens. It's just a clock, okay? And also it gets weirder. if you're going over an hour and 5 minutes, wait a minute. Does this person owes me money for my 5 minutes that I went over? Or if you wrap it up a little bit earlier, 5 minutes earlier, you're like, wait, should I give them money back because I didn't did the 1 hour full time clock? So it's messy,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
not the best way of running things, right? But I see a lot of coaches is doing that, and it should be tied with a transformation, right? Not
Absolutely.
necessarily with the clock. That is just
Yeah.
one thing that I think someone created and that made sense. I don't know why, and we try to repeat it sometimes. But anyhow, this is just my long-winded way of saying, Nancy, that I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate you being here and sharing so openly today. It was great having you on.
Pedro, it was a distinct pleasure. Your questions were so thoughtful. I really appreciated the opportunity to be on your show, to share some of my insights. And I do hope, and this is something I use at the end of all of my sessions, I would ask people who are listening, what was your biggest insight about this podcast today? What did you take away? And that's how I end my sessions whenever that ending point comes, usually within an hour, right? Could be 60 minutes, could be 57, could be 65, who knows, minutes. But it's not about that. It's about setting that time aside for themselves. And last little piece I'll say to you is that the family thing got too much and I stopped. I'm like, there's too much closeness here. I'm getting judgmental and I can't be a good coach. So let me refer you to one of my friends in the same class. So that was just, and what I utilized, I should say my family for, is give me one of your friends and say your cousin, your sister is studying, because I didn't want to coach family anymore.
Right. We want to keep Thanksgiving amicable, right? That's
Exactly.
basically okay.
Exactly. And the last thing you wanted at Thanksgiving, hey, you're a coach. Can you give me advice? And I was like, no, no, no. I'm
Not
off
really.
duty. Right.
Anyhow, great having you.
Thank you
Okay.
so much. All right.
That's it for this episode. This episode, as well as this podcast, was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help business owners elevate their business to 6, 7, and 8-figure years, all without burning out. If you're looking to grow your business, as well as get the time freedom that you are looking for, visit us at joinpurplecircle.com and see what we can do to help you and your business.